Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Katie Fournier. I am the Director of Customer Success and Operations here at CheckpointEHR, and I will be your host for today. Today's webinar topic is on super billing that pays, a smarter system for out-of-network benefits. This webinar is going to be a really practical, solution-focused session for therapists who want to simplify their super billing, reduce admin time, improve their out-of-network billing process. So whether you're new to out-of-network billing or looking to level up your system, you'll definitely be walking away with some strategies that you can implement right away. So we're thrilled today to be joined by, sorry if I mess up your name, Sanjana, right?
Yeah, Sanjana.
Yeah, okay. Should have asked that in the beginning. So she is the co-founder of Thrizer, which is a platform that's dedicated to making the out-of-network process, easier for both therapists and clients. She brings a wealth of insight into what's broken in traditional super billing, and how technology can fix it. So yeah, so she'll be walking us through everything from the basics to how to boost those reimbursement rates, enhance client trust, and at the end of each section, we'll actually have a Q&A portion. So definitely make sure to put those questions in the Q&A section so that we can cover that when that time comes up. Let's see. And then just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So everyone is muted. I believe the cameras are enabled. If not, I will do that momentarily and you'll be able to turn your camera on if you wish. There will be a Q&A session after each section in the presentation. And then if you do have a question, just make sure you record it in this Q&A portion here. I'll be posting something in there in a second so you can see it pop up. But yeah, all right. So with that, I will pass it over.
Thanks so much, Katie, and thank you everyone for joining. I know super bills are not fun to talk about, but I will try to make it as informative and engaging as possible. So let me share my screen really quick here. I'm gonna go to slideshow. Awesome. So we're gonna talk through super bills, out-of-network benefits, kind of everything within that world. We're going to dive deep actually into just the nitty-gritties of it. I feel like a lot of times, you're probably familiar in terms of, Googling it, or, probably heard it from a colleague, or probably heard it from your clients, but it kind of takes a bit to kind of have everything sink in on what exactly are out-of-network benefits. How do you actually tap into them? How can you help your clients better access them? So that's everything that we're going to cover today. And also, how can you successfully incorporate it into your intake process to ultimately help build a more sustainable practice for yourself? So that's what we're going to be focusing on, as Katie mentioned. I will stop for questions after each section. I know a lot of this can be super meaty and can get a bit mathy at times, so definitely want to help break it down. My goal here is that you'll walk away with, just a much better understanding of out-of-network benefits than you're able to find just, again, by Googling or kind of reading up on it. So here are the topics that we'll be covering today. So we'll start with the client funnel just to kind of orient us, figure out where exactly do out-of-network benefits fit into the whole process. We'll dive right into these benefits. How does the super bill process work? How are reimbursement rates actually determined? This is, again, as Katie mentioned, the work that Thrizer does. And so I can share a bit in-depth kind of behind the scenes information on reimbursement rates, allowed amounts, if you've heard about those, just how everything kind of fits in, and how you can kind of explain this to your clients. And then ultimately, finally, we'll end with tips and tricks as well as some resources. So let's go ahead and dive in. Client funnel. So if we think about the client funnel, we typically, if you're thinking about starting the journey as, clients hear about you through your website, or if you do social media ads or whatever that might be, to ultimately nurturing and having them start as clients with you. typically we break it out into kind of two steps, right? Attracting clients and then retaining clients. So of course, attracting is all the things that you've probably already been doing, referrals, Psychology Today, have a website, maybe you blog, maybe you do SEO, kind of all of those things that is the first step of a client hearing about you. Then, of course, retaining clients, you guys know this way better than I do, everything that you need to make sure that a client feels comfortable and empowered to continue sessions with you for consistent and long-term benefits. But there's kind of a piece that we don't talk about as much in the funnel, and that's this middle portion right here. How do we actually convert clients after they hear about us? So I hear a lot when, therapists are coming to Thrizer, they're like, hey, I feel like I'm doing all the right things, right? I feel like I'm on Psychology Today. I have a great website. I've even dabbled with some social media and blogging. And, they come to me. I can see that engagement. We have a consult call, and then I'm not able to convert them. And that's actually where, out-of-network benefits can be really, really helpful. And so, of course, consult calls, that fit that you feel during that call can be really helpful. But oftentimes the barrier that challenge that comes in place for a client, especially if you're a private pay therapist, is the cost, right? It can be burdensome to them. It can be a lot. Maybe you offer them sliding scales. Maybe you do pro bono work. Another tool that exists in your toolkit is out-of-network benefits, and it can actually be a really powerful kind of narrative that you build into this particular part of the funnel so that you're able to actually convert those clients. And you talk about cost, right? You could say, hey, I'm an out-of-network therapist. I'm not paneled with your insurance or any insurances, but there is a way that you can save money on our sessions. And that's where out-of-network benefits comes in. So that's actually kind of where, this fits in. I think it also fits into the retention element, right? Even if a client maybe is comfortable paying your full private pay rate for the first month or 2 or 3, down the line, right? Maybe they hit financial hardship, or they feel like, okay, do I want to scale back to maybe instead of weekly sessions to bi-weekly sessions or monthly sessions, right? Because the cost is kind of catching up to me. That's where out-of-network benefits can also be really helpful, because even if a client is able to pay your rate in the beginning, things might change in the future. I'm kind of speaking from personal experience as a longtime therapy goer. I didn't know about out-of-network benefits for the longest time. This was way before I joined Thrizer, and it was like, yeah, I can pay $150, $200, weekly. And then at some point I hit financial hardship and I had to discontinue therapy with my therapist because I couldn't support it anymore. And if I'd known and been receiving reimbursements through out-of-network benefits, I feel like I would have been able to continue, maybe even like weekly or bi-weekly or monthly sessions with her. And so that's where, in the converting clients and the retention of clients, that's really where out-of-network benefits can really be a powerful tool for you. So I'll pause there. That's kind of the first primer for all of this. Any questions? And Katie, I'll let you kind of chime in with any questions here.
Sure. I'm not seeing any questions so far.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. All right, so we'll keep moving then. Now that we kind of know where out-of-network benefits fits into this whole journey, let's talk about what they are, right? Maybe you've heard about them, maybe you haven't. So we'll break it down kind of from a very high level. What are out-of-network benefits? So out-of-network benefits, kind of the technical definition of this, is benefits that exist in a client's individual insurance plan that allow them to receive reimbursements for services from clinicians who don't accept their insurance, right? So it can feel like a mouthful. Let's break it down further. Essentially, it means even if you as a therapist don't accept insurance directly, clients can still receive insurance reimbursement. And the average savings that we've seen for kind of the thousands of claims that we've submitted is between 60 to 70% of the cost of your session can be saved. So they're really just paying 50% or less of your session cost if they're able to kind of tap into those out-of-network benefits. So let's do a quick example here. So let's say your rate is $200. You still get your full $200, right? You're charging $200. They might only be paying $80 after reimbursement. So this is kind of the overall kind of overview of all of this. We'll kind of break down everything that goes into this in a second, but let's just kind of quickly put it all together and kind of explain where and why this is helpful. So why incorporate out-of-network benefits or super bills? We'll get into kind of that in a second, but why incorporate them into your practice if you haven't already? You earn and set the rate you want, right? So, there are these things called allowed amounts. We'll get into what that means, but insurance does not dictate how much you can charge for your session, right? If you are a private pay therapist, or let's say that you're only paneled with one insurance, for every other insurance client out there, you are a private pay therapist. So you earn and set the rate that you want. So automatically that means that, you're able to build a caseload for yourself that is much more manageable, less burnout, right? You don't deal with insurance, audits, clawbacks, kind of all of the things that exist if you were paneled in network with insurance. Well, we do get questions around, okay, but sometimes they do ask for notes. Sometimes they do ask for XYZ. And we'll kind of get into those edge cases in a second, but overall, you will not be dealing with insurance, not nearly or anywhere close to how much you would be dealing with insurance if you were in network. And then all while you're more accessible to your clients, right? So enabling savings again of 50% or more on your sessions. So this can really be a way for you to unlock a more sustainable approach for both you and your clients. Net, if you were in network, absolutely agree that your clients would be paying less, right? Their copay might just be $30 or $40 when you're out of network. But and in network, you're probably earning much less, but out of network, you're setting the rate you want. You're not dealing with a lot of that admin burden. Yes, they are paying slightly higher, but net, it is something, system that does benefit kind of both, can create a win-win for both parties involved. So that's essentially what, where out-of-network benefits can be helpful to incorporate within your practice. I want to quickly address kind of the FAQs and kind of the questions that might be coming up in your mind, or maybe you came in with these questions to this webinar. So want to just get that out of the bat, kind of answer them out of the bat here. So what percentage of plans have out-of-network benefits? So, of course, the plans that have out-of-network benefits, and maybe I'll answer this next question alongside, is PPO plans have out-of-network benefits. Medicare and Medicaid don't have out-of-network benefits. And then if you've heard of HMO plans, they don't have out-of-network benefits. But there are also some non-HMO, non-PPO commercial plans that will have out-of-network benefits. For example, TRICARE has pretty good out-of-network benefits, right? So, if we look at the full gamut, at least we can't speak to, like, from Thrizer's perspective, like all of the entire set of plans out there that exist, but the clients who come to us and they ask us, hey, can you check our benefits and can you verify whether we have out-of-network benefits? About 70% of them end up having out-of-network benefits. Of course, it could be a self-selected bias, could be a smaller group who already know they have PPO plans. But the point is, a lot of clients do have out-of-network benefits. And the only way to really know is if you check their benefits. What services and CPT codes can be reimbursed with ON? Pretty much anything. And in fact, in the out-of-network setting, insurance tends to be much more lenient in terms of services that they may cause a little bit more trouble for in network. For example, couples therapy, group therapy, assessments, evaluations, right? These are things that we have seen clients get successfully reimbursed for, but they struggle with that in network. Right. So that tends to be kind of, across the board. If the first claim goes through and it gets reimbursed, chances are it'll continue to get reimbursed for that particular service or CPT code and all of that. How do we know if a client's plan has out-of-network benefits? The best way is, the client can check their insurance plan. They can also call their insurance and verify if they have out-of-network benefits. Of course, Thrizer, we also have a free calculator where you can plug in the client's information and it'll kind of, give you, yes, they have out-of-network benefits, here's what that deductible looks like, et cetera. So that's also a tool that you can use. It's completely free. And then, so the next two questions here is how do clients access their benefits? And then how do insurance determine the reimbursement amounts? These are questions that we get a lot. So we're going to dive much deeper into this in the next two sections. And that's kind of what the next portion of this presentation will be focused on. Okay, so I'll pause again for questions. I know I kind of covered a lot. So any questions so far on any of the things that I've covered?
Yeah, so do you see out-of-network benefits more with one insurance company or certain insurance companies versus others, or is it like really very plan specific?
It's very plan specific. Yeah. So outside of Medicare and Medicaid not having out-of-network benefits, the big four, right? United, Cigna, Aetna, BCBS, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they will, have plans kind of across the board, ones with out-of-network benefits and ones without. There are local plans as well that have out-of-network benefits. So it really just comes down to picking the right plan, and PPO is kind of that buzzword that you want to look for, your clients want to look for, because those tend to have those benefits. The one I will mention is Kaiser. Kaiser tends to be mostly HMO plans. So in more cases than not, if you see a Kaiser patient, I would still recommend that they check their benefits to verify what kind of plan they have. But a lot of times Kaiser ends up being HMO plans. And those tend to be, those tend to not have out-of-network benefits. But for any other commercial plan, it just comes down to the specific, or commercial insurers comes down to the specific plan.
Okay, great. Alrighty. Okay, that was the only one we had.
Perfect. Sounds good. Cool. So now let's dive into how do clients access these benefits, right? So as I mentioned, you as a private pay or out-of-network therapist are not getting involved in any of the insurance stuff. So then how do clients have to access their benefits then? So let's do a quick recap of in-network versus out-of-network billing, because that can be kind of helpful to frame everything. So in-network therapy, most of you are familiar with this. Insurance sets the rates that you charge as a clinician, and client pays a copay for the sessions. You'll submit the claim through the EHR, and then clinicians wait for the reimbursement from insurance, right? Which can take weeks, months, however long. So that's in-network therapy. You as the clinician are kind of on the hook to wait for the reimbursement from insurance. And they also set the rates for you. Out-of-network is you set the rates that you want to charge, and then clients submit a super bill. So you will issue a super bill to them. We'll talk through what that is and get more into detail on what goes on a super bill, but you will provide them with a super bill. The client will then be in charge of submitting that super bill to their insurance company, and they will receive a reimbursement check back about 6 weeks later, depending on their insurance company, that reimburses them for a portion of the session fee. So in this case, the client is still paying your full rate upfront. So if your rate is, let's say, 200 and they're receiving, let's say, 120 back from insurance, they have to pay your full rate of 200 and wait for that 120 back in the form of a check after they submit their super bill and about, receive it in about 6 weeks. So as you can see here, of course, it's kind of more work for the client, but there are a lot of benefits for you as a clinician. And super bills, once you kind of get into the hang of it, can be kind of a reliable way that a client can receive reimbursement. So let's dive into what is a super bill then, if you're not familiar with it. It's an invoice that you provide to your clients that they submit to insurance for reimbursement. And here are kind of the high-level things that go on a super bill. So, of course, you'll have your practice information, NPI, tax ID, contact info, client information, name, date of birth, again, contact information. You will need to provide a diagnosis code with every session that you are super billing for. So this is a question we get a lot. Do I have to provide a diagnosis code? The answer is yes. So the insurance company will not process any claims unless a diagnosis code is provided. And then, of course, the list of sessions with the dates of service, the CPT codes, and the session fee associated with each of those sessions. And that's pretty much it. So, you know, a lot of times your EHR will have, and maybe Checkpoint has it, kind of a feature that allows you to kind of just create monthly super bills super easily. Even if not, there is a pretty standard template that you can find with just this information. And once you have that template in place, you kind of just update it and provide it to your clients. A question we get often is, how often should I be providing super bills to my clients? Typically monthly is what most clinicians do. But of course, if the client, you know, is more financially stretched and they actually want to submit super bills more frequently, they can do so. They can do it bi-weekly, you know, every 2 weeks, you know, after every week if you're willing to provide the super bills. But typically monthly is when most clinicians provide a super bill to their clients. So that's all. Again, it's just kind of a summary of all of that. Let's walk through the end-to-end super bill process and how that looks like for a client. So again, client will pay your full session for the session, full rate for the session. You will provide them with a super bill with all of the information from the previous slide. Client will then need to submit the super bill to insurance. And so they'll kind of have to figure out, depending on their particular plan, whether they need to fax it in, whether it's done online, whether it's through email. It kind of just depends on the plan they have. But it's usually a PDF that they then will make sure it gets to their insurance company. And then typically, like, the issue with insurance generally, and also for this process, is that there isn't an online portal that says, oh, we've received your super bill, we're working on it. And so it can get clients a bit antsy of, okay, like, what's happening with my super bill? I haven't heard back for about a month. So typically a client will, if they'd like, follow up with insurance for a status update. And then after that, the client receives a reimbursement check for a portion of that session fee. And then finally, they'll deposit it into their bank account. Of course, this seems like a really cumbersome process when you look at it this way. But again, when a client is able to successfully submit 1 or 2 or 3 super bills, they'll get into the kind of the hang of it, and can rely on super bills as a very, you know, routine and reliable way to receive reimbursements and some financial relief for your sessions. So that's essentially how that total super bill process looks. Awesome. So I will pause again for any questions. Any questions on super bills, the process, what goes on it, diagnosis codes, any of that?
Sure. Let's see. So one question we have is a contract needed with the private insurance carrier?
That's a really good question. In most cases, no. One that comes to mind that you will need a contract is TRICARE. They recently started requiring this, so that is one that comes to mind. But in general, you do not need to have a contract in place when you're an out-of-network provider. If there are other local plans that have it, you just kind of have to check it. But in terms of kind of like the big 4 I was talking about, and Kaiser and things like that, like, they don't require you to have an out-of-network contract with the insurance carrier.
Okay, great. And some of these things you might be covering, so feel free. Let's see. How do you recommend handling out-of-network benefit conversations with clients when using super bills?
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that.
Okay. And then another one was walking through what makes a clean super bill and common mistakes to avoid.
Yeah, so these are kind of the basic information. A lot of times the things that I've seen be missing is diagnosis codes. That's kind of why I doubled, kind of emphasize on that. Diagnosis codes are important. Another pitfall is that Z codes tend to be a bit tricky. So F codes in general tend to be reimbursed very successfully. Z codes are a bit iffy. It's kind of 50-50 in terms of whether they will be successfully reimbursed. So that can be an issue that comes up. Ensuring that all of your information is the most up to date in terms of your tax ID, NPI, address, kind of everything aligning and making sure things look good there. And just kind of everything that you see on this screen are the things that you will need to include on a super bill. If any aspect of that is missing, they might come back and say error or missing information or something like that. A lot of times when insurance kind of comes back to you and is like, we need more information, they're sometimes not very clear on what exactly they need.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, if you do have all of these pieces of information on there, it should be successful in terms of at least getting processed by insurance.
And is that communication when something is like missing or it's incorrect, is that communication happening with the client or is it happening with the provider?
It happens with the client. Yeah.
With the client. Okay.
Yeah, since the client's the one that's submitting it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's see. And another one. If the dates of service started before their plan started, should the super bill a provider sends to the client have all dates of service listed or just the dates that had an active plan?
Active plan. Yeah. I mean, you could probably include the other ones. It just won't be reimbursed, right? If you have an automatic generating, EHR or something that creates the super bill and it has those past dates on it, don't worry about taking it off, but just know that those sessions will not be reimbursed. But if you're creating it on your own, just include the dates that have the active, the active plan.
Okay. Okay, so we got one more. Do you find that certain payer types are more receptive or responsive to super bill submissions than others?
I want to clarify what you mean by payer types. Again, like commercial plans tend to be the ones that have out-of-network benefits, right? So if you're looking at a Medicare and Medicaid, they won't have out-of-network benefits. And again, as we discussed earlier, it really comes down to the plan, right? So of course, super bills are like all other, in-network claims that clinicians send, can be kind of like, okay, why did it get denied? Like, I don't understand what happened. But for the most part, if a client's plan has out-of-network benefits in their insurance plan, they should be getting insurance reimbursement for out-of-network benefits. It might be kind of harder and like it might get denied and you have to resubmit a little bit, but as long as the plan has it, it should go through. So it really doesn't come down to, okay, like, are there specific insurances again that are better at it? We haven't seen any kind of indication that kind of points to that. It's kind of all insurance plans that have out-of-network benefits.
Okay, great. All right. And are the super bills typically like mailed into the insurance company, or is each insurance company kind of different on how they want to receive it?
Yes, each insurance company is different, which is kind of the stressful part in the beginning in figuring out how to do it. So the client, that's usually step one, right? Figuring out, okay, does it need to be mailed in? Does it need to be faxed in? Does it need to be emailed in, right? So, or is there an online portal that they can do so? So that's kind of step one of the client needing to figure that out. And that should be kind of written within their insurance plan. Or if they have an online portal, or they can email someone to figure that out. But it kind of just varies by the plan.
Okay. And is that the same for the like super bill format? Like, is there one standard format that all insurance companies use, or does each company have like their own form of a super bill?
No, so there isn't like a form that you necessarily fill out. You will still need a physical kind of PDF super bill. They might ask you to re-enter information on the portal. So a client, sometimes I've heard that some insurance portals are more manual than others, where even if you have that PDF that has all of the information that it already has, the client may still need to re-enter, let's say, the clinician NPI, or need to re-enter dates of service and things like that. Again, that varies by the specific portal or insurance plan. But the super bill itself, there isn't like a standard format. Like if you Google super bill, there's going to be a bunch of different variations, but on average, they all kind of look the same in the sense that, on the top, you'll have you'll have the clinician information, it'll follow with the client information, and there's usually a table that says date, service, CPT, and session fee, right? So a table for kind of that piece of information. And then all the other pieces of information that's kind of agnostic of date, like the clinician information, client information, and diagnosis code will kind of be up top. So as long as you follow any kind of format like that, you should be fine. And again, just making sure that all of these pieces of information are actually on there, it would be the most important check to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. All right, I don't see any others.
Okay, awesome. Great questions. Cool. So now let's quickly chat through, because this is a question we often get. I personally feel like it's our responsibility to talk about this as Thrizer. Like, a lot of times these are not things that are kind of shared from the insurance company, and as much transparency as we can provide, I'd like to provide it in terms of how are reimbursement rates determined, because it can feel like such a black box. And so this is the part that gets a little mathy. So if there are questions, please drop it in the chat. But let's start kind of, again, high level, client responsibility. So if there's one formula you walk away with from today, this would be it, because we get a lot of questions around, okay, what is the client's responsibility? The client's responsibility is essentially your rate minus whatever they receive back from insurance reimbursement. The difference between that is what the client responsibility is. So let's do a quick example then. So if you charge $200, let's say you provide a super bill, they submit the super bill, and they receive a $120 back from insurance, right? So in that case, essentially, how much the client has paid for that session is $80, right? Since they've gotten a $120 reimbursement check back. And so ultimately, like, that's the number that matters the most, right? That's what the clients will be tracking. They're like, when you're kind of incorporating, we'll talk about this more towards the end of how do you share all of this with a client. That number is the one that, clients will want to hear. It's like, after you use your out-of-network benefits and receive reimbursement, you're no longer paying $200 for my session. You're actually just paying $80 for each of my sessions, right? And that's what they're going to care about. So how does this $80 get determined, right? So obviously your rate is your rate, right? So that is something that you have full control over. Ultimately, it comes down to this insurance reimbursement, right? Like, so what goes into that insurance reimbursement that then has a direct impact on what that client responsibility is? So how are reimbursement rates determined? This is kind of the most important disclaimer. It's out-of-network reimbursements vary by individual plans, and in fact, even by individual clients. You could see two people have very similar plans, in fact, the same plan, and they could have different reimbursement amounts. And that's just another way that insurance decides to be kind of black boxy and shady about it. But what you will see kind of standard throughout each of the client's plans is these three things. One is they'll have a deductible. There is this thing called an allowed amount, which we'll talk about in more detail, that determines what that reimbursement amount is, along with that co-insurance percentage. So we'll kind of put these pieces together now. Deductible. So this is the first important thing that a client will need to know about their specific out-of-network benefit breakdown. It is, how much am I supposed to pay as a client fully out of pocket before reimbursements start kicking in? So it's not, that, if they pay $200 for your sessions, they're going to start receiving $120 back from day one. Typically, in most plans, there will be a deductible that needs to be met before they start receiving that $120 check back, right? And that amount is called the deductible. And during that phase, your clients are paying your full rate to meet that deductible. And then once that deductible is met is when the reimbursements kick in. So breaking this down a little bit in more detail, Again, the client is responsible for your full session fee until they meet that deductible. We'll also do an example with this so that it kind of hits harder towards the end, but just kind of, keep this all in your mind for now. Deductibles reset every year. That's another important thing. And maybe I'll kind of, and then only allowed amount is applied towards deductible. We'll come back to that piece. Actually, I'm going to get rid of that for now. The typical deductible that we've seen in processing the claims, of course, there are going to be high deductible plans. Those are plans that the client has opted for because they, feel like they're probably not going to be using medical services as much. They want to pay a lower premium, right? If they've opted for a high deductible plan, chances are, even if they have out-of-network benefits, it's not going to be that helpful to them, right? Their deductible might be $5,000 or $10,000. There's no way, even if they see you every day for a session, which obviously doesn't happen, that they will be able to meet that deductible, right? But if we're talking about normal plans, the plans that weren't specifically marked as a high deductible plan, the range that we see is between $1,000 to $3,000. So if you look at kind of, you map it out and you see how long it takes for a client to meet that deductible, it ends up being about 3 to 5 months. So what that means is they are still paying your full rate for the first 3-ish months of the year. After that, they will start receiving reimbursements. And the deductible resets at the end of the year, right? So even if they've met that deductible, let's say by June of the current year, come January next year, that deductible is going to reset to $3,000 or $1,000 or whatever that is. All of this seems like bad news, and it honestly is. It's just the way that insurance is, again, kind of created, and they've set the rules this way. I don't want to paint a rosy picture of it at all. But if we could find a silver lining in all of this, it would be that what would otherwise be the second half of the year that they would be paying your full rate and paying that $200, at least for the second half of the year, they're only paying $80, right? And then the other kind of silver lining is, especially, we've also seen clients that have $750 deductibles or $1,000 deductibles, right? That means they'll meet it within the first, 2 months if they see you weekly. And so in that case, that's great for them, right? Because then they start receiving reimbursements come March of that year. So all of this to say, this isn't supposed to be a direct replacement for in-network copays. It's never going to be, right? But this is just a system that better allows you to service clients and help them get some money back on what would be otherwise completely private pay sessions, right? And so that's kind of where we come into all this. Again, when you check benefits for a client, the step one is always going to be, what is that deductible looking like for this particular client? We'll come back to this piece because we haven't covered allowed amount, but I'll leave it here for now. Only the allowed amount applies towards their deductible. So again, I won't go into detail at this current moment, but we'll cover it in the example. Awesome. So then we've referenced the allowed amount. And so what exactly is it? The allowed amount is essentially the maximum amount that an insurance is willing to reimburse for each out-of-network therapy session. So let's dive into this a little bit in more detail. This is the portion that makes reimbursement rates vary by client, also the portion that isn't directly published in a client's insurance plan. So the deductible is directly published in a client's insurance plan. So when they read it or they call their insurance company, they'll be able to, clearly tell them, yes, your deductible is $3,000. But this piece, they'll never say, yeah, your allowed amount is $120, right? They're never going to say that out loud. It's kind of 50-50. They'll even answer that question for you, even if you straight up ask them. Allowed amounts are a complete black box and only known after the first claim is successfully been kind of processed. Allowed amounts do not determine how much you as a clinician can charge. So this is another piece that I mentioned earlier. It tends to be an area of confusion for people. They'll say, okay, the client's plan is dictating that the allowed amount is only $150. Does that mean I can only charge $150? No, that just means that that's the maximum that they are willing to reimburse for that session. You can absolutely charge 200, 250, whatever you want to charge. And then finally, the client may actually be responsible for a portion of the allowed amount. And this is the part that gets really confusing for people because, when they call their insurance company or they see their insurance plan, they'll be like, great, your co-insurance is 30%. So they assume that insurance is going to be covering the remaining 70% of your therapist session, right? That's not how it works. They're only going to be covering 70% of the allowed amount. That is dictated by that insurance plan. Anything beyond that, plus that extra 30% that the client's co-insurance is, will need to be covered by the client. So again, we'll do an example that kind of ties all of this together, but let's quickly just kind of confirm or recap what a co-insurance is. It is the percentage of allowed amount that the client is responsible for. So it's based off of the allowed amount and not the clinician's rate. That's, again, that example that I just said of if it says the client's co-insurance is 30%, doesn't mean that they're going to be reimbursed 70% of your rate. It's going to be 70% of the allowed amount. And then this is actually published directly in the insurance plan along with the deductible. And then co-insurances we typically see range from 20 to 50%. Sometimes you'll even see plans with 0% co-insurances. Sometimes you'll see a plan with 60%, but the typical range that we see is 20 to 50%. Pause there. Now let's do a quick kind of putting it all together. Let's say that the allowed amount is 150 and co-insurance is 20%, right? So in the insurance plan itself, it would have said the co-insurance is 20%. Let's say that they've submitted a claim and it's come back, and at that point they'll know, okay, the allowed amount is 150. That means that insurance reimbursement is going to be $120, right? So it's going to be the remaining 80% of the 150. The client is going to be responsible for $30, which is 20% of the 150. And then remember, so far, this is just the portion based on the allowed amount. So if your rate is actually 200, right, we're going to need to add on that extra $50 as well. So let's bring it all together. Hopefully this kind of makes sense once we do. Let's say clinician rate is 200, deductible is 1,500, allowed amount is 150, and co-insurance is 20%. What does this mean? Pre-deductible, a client will pay $200, which is your session rate, for the first 10 sessions. And the reason it's 10 sessions and not like 7 sessions is because only 150 will apply towards that deductible. That's that, kind of little disclaimer that we had on the deductible slide. So even if they're paying 200, only 150 will get applied towards that deductible because 150 is the allowed amount, right? So in fact, they'll be paying $200 for the first 10 sessions. After 10 sessions, they've met their deductible and they're eligible for reimbursements. So post-deductible, the client receives $120 in reimbursement per session. So how do we get to that 120 again? You see that co-insurance is 20%. That means that insurance's responsibility is 80% of the allowed amount, which is 150. So that's 120. That's what that reimbursement check that they receive after 6 weeks will say. And so the client is responsible for 200 minus 120, which is $80 for your session. So this is good news, right? So the client only pays $80 while you've earned $200 for your session. Insurance has covered 120 of it. So that's kind of, bringing it all together in terms of how out-of-network benefits can be helpful kind of day in, day out. And if you actually map this out, right? Like if they're seeing you for sessions through the rest of the year, let's say it's weekly sessions, they've actually saved thousands of dollars, right? They've saved 120 per session. So if they see you for 10 sessions, they've already saved $1,200 right there, which could be really, really material for a lot of clients. So that's essentially how the math works for all of this. If you were to take away one piece from all of this, it's to say that, hey, we don't know what your reimbursement amount is going to be. We're going to submit, we're going to, make sure that we get you a super bill. You're going to submit your first claim, and then you're going to hear back on what that reimbursement amount is. You will have to meet the deductible first. So that's kind of the summary of everything here. So I will pause again for questions. I know this was the super meaty part, so I'm anticipating a lot of questions here.
There we go. Another term that you hear along with like deductible and co-insurance is like maximum out of pocket. Does that play into the out-of-network benefits at all, or is that something specific to like contracted?
Yeah, it depends on the plan. Maximum out of pocket, there will be, if it does apply to out-of-network services, there will be a separate out-of-pocket max for out-of-network services. So the client will need to kind of look for two separate numbers there. There'll be an out-of-pocket max. Likely that's just for in-network services, and then the out-of-pocket max just for out-of-network services. So there will be two separate numbers. In most cases, it just applies to the in-network picture though.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let's see. And then someone else asked about a list of carriers that don't require a contract. So I'm assuming that's like insurance carriers that you can do out-of-network benefits for.
It just comes down to the plan again, right? So I know it can be a little tricky to understand. You as a provider really don't need to, again, register as an out-of-network provider or need to necessarily be like, okay, it's only going to be Aetna, for example. It's going to come down to the specific insurance plan that the client has, right? And so it's on the client to verify whether they have out-of-network benefits. And of course, we'll kind of show you where Thrizer fits into all of this. It kind of fills that hole in step one and gives you visibility as a clinician into the client's benefits. But if we're talking in a non-Thrizer world, the client will essentially need to call their insurance plan and do the due diligence ahead of time, unless you want to do it for them, to be like, yes, I have out-of-network benefits in my plan, and so please give me a super bill, right? Or, you continue to just give people super bill and they kind of figure it out. You give all of your clients super bills. Again, it's on them to kind of call their insurance company and figure out whether they have out-of-network benefits. So outside of Medicare and Medicaid, any plan, any insurance carrier can have out-of-network benefits. It comes down to the specific plan that the client has chosen.
Okay, awesome. And then do you have any tips or tools that providers can use to assist their clients with checking those out-of-network benefits or helping them understand like what portion they'll get reimbursed for?
Yes, and that's where Thrizer comes in. So I'm happy to that'll be at the very end of this. It is a tool that's meant to kind of simplify all of this and make it super easy. So it's not on the client to call their insurance. It's not on you to call insurance. Thrizer is going to figure out, what that out-of-network breakdown looks like for that client.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. There's another question. What do you see? Like, have you seen where the charge, say the therapist is charging $100, but the allowed amount is $150? Like, do the therapists typically increase at that point, or how does that kind of work?
Yes, they do. They do. So a lot of times they will, wait for, there's kind of two flavors of this. One is based on the insurance estimate, for example, that Thrizer provides. Let's say that we provide an estimate that says that, oh, the allowed amount is $140. You can go ahead and change your rate to $140 at that point. That can be tricky because we're not entirely sure, but the point at which that clinicians do change their rate is especially when a client meets their deductible, right? At that point, the allowed amount will not change. Let's say that we found out that the allowed amount was $150 when the client was still working towards their deductible. Maybe you're still charging $100. Of course, it'll be a little bit slower for them to meet that deductible. In that case, they would meet it after 20 sessions, right? Because you're charging 100, 100, 100 to meet that, or sorry, 15 sessions in this example, because only 100 gets applied towards that deductible. And so it takes them a bit longer to meet that deductible. But after that, a lot of clinicians do find it kind of, they prefer to then, at the point at which the client starts receiving reimbursement, increase their rate to 150, right? So that we're then maximizing reimbursements. So at that point, the clinician's getting 150, but the client's actually paying less than 100, right? They're paying $80 in this example. So yes, you could tweak your rate maybe as soon as you find out what the allowed amount is after that first claim, even if they're working towards a deductible, or certainly at the point at which the client is eligible for reimbursements, let's say after those first 10 sessions, and then change your rate there. Again, the quick conversation you'd probably want to have with your client is, hey, like, it looks like I'm increasing my rate, but because you're going to be receiving reimbursement, your out-of-pocket responsibility is going to come down, right? It's going to be $80 actually, even though it looks like I'm increasing my rate. So that is kind of a conversation that a lot of clinicians have with their clients.
Okay, awesome, great. Okay, that is all we got.
Awesome, sounds good. Great. So in the last kind of 5-10 minutes here, I'm going to walk through tips and tricks as well as where Thrizer fits into all of this. So the tip number one is add out-of-network benefits to your website and intake process. Again, that's where we mentioned in that funnel that we were looking at earlier, it makes the most sense to kind of start talking about this stuff. As soon as a client comes to your website, they're aware that there's this thing called out-of-network benefits. And again, you bring it up in your consult call, or you bring it up after the first session or via email, whatever it might be. You might say something like this, right? While I don't accept your insurance, you may have out-of-network benefits in your insurance plan. This means that you would be able to get back a large chunk of our session fees as reimbursement. I'm happy to provide you with super bills, right? So that's just a quick way of letting them know, hey, like, I will not be, I won't be able to provide you kind of a lower rate, but insurance, will provide reimbursement. We'll want to check whether you have out-of-network benefits. I'm happy to provide you with super bills, right? Mm-hmm. So that's tip one. Tip two is take the time to walk clients through the super bill process, because they may have never heard of what a super bill is, don't really know how to get started. So here's kind of a quick script for that. Here's a super bill. You'll need to submit it to your insurance company, either via fax, email, or your portal. Once you do so, it takes about 6 weeks for them to process the claim, after which you'll receive a reimbursement check in the mail, right? So that way they kind of understand what the process looks like, and are able to know, okay, like, this is what I do, let them know, hey, just make sure you check on your portal how you need to submit the super bill. And it will take about 6 weeks for you to receive that check. And again, just gives them a little bit more transparency on the whole process if the client is completely new to how super bills work. Tip 3 is automating this whole process with Thrizer. And so this is the quick Thrizer plug. Before I go to the next slide, we strongly, we feel like we're not just a company, we're really driving kind of a mission, like revolution mission here, where we hate super bills. Actually, super bills are great, but there is a way to make this whole process so much easier for clients. Out-of-network benefits are amazing. Super bills can be tricky. So we don't work with super bills at all. We try to automate the whole thing. So this was kind of this is a recap of the end-to-end process, right? Thrizer actually, if you use Thrizer, none of this applies to you. All you're doing is one simple step, which is you use Thrizer to charge your clients via our payment platform. And the payment platform, you can think of us similar to like a Stripe or a Square. You're just charging clients through Thrizer's payment platform, and the client actually just pays a copay post-deductible or a co-insurance post-deductible. So if we're looking at that example that we had on all the previous slides, instead of them paying $200 to you and waiting for that $120 back, they are just paying $80 for your sessions. That is what their credit card is going to get charged. Plus, we charge an extra fee, 5% fee. That's what their credit card is charged. They're never charged the $200 or they don't need to worry about submitting the super bill or anything because Thrizer handles everything. We have that instant benefits calculator that I was talking about. It's completely free. You can use it today. Your clients can use it today. They just enter in their insurance information, their date of birth, and it'll actually tell them, yes, you have out-of-network benefits. Here's what that deductible is, and here's what an estimated reimbursement amount might look like for you. Of course, it's estimated because we don't know what that allowed amount is, but we just collect a bunch of data from different plans. And so we're able to provide kind of a ballpark estimate for what they might be able to receive back. Again, every time you charge a client, an automatic claim submission happens directly to insurance, so you don't have to worry about providing them with super bills, have them figure out where do I submit it, fax it, email it, all of that. Thrizer actually fronts the rest of your fees. So you will be receiving $200 during that week's payout, even if the client was only charged $80. And then essentially we are waiting on the reimbursement of that $120 back, and we will keep that $120 once the claim is processed in 6 weeks. So you're not waiting for the claim to get processed, nor is the client. We're kind of on the hook to wait for it, and we have a no back charges policy. So that's kind of the high, kind of quick breeze through version of Thrizer. I'm sure there's a lot of questions here. But really quickly, since we're short on time, here's how kind of the talk track changes if you were to automate everything with Thrizer. And this is what would, you would incorporate into your intake or put on your website and things like that. So you could say, while I don't accept your insurance, you may have out-of-network benefits in your insurance plan that could save you a large portion of our session fees. I'm happy to take care of the insurance stress for you, like verifying your benefits and submitting claims via Thrizer. You can also just pay a copay for sessions after you meet your deductible, right? So that is kind of the simplest way that you can help a client, because it takes away the burden from the client in needing to request and submit a super bill and wait for that reimbursement check. And also for you, all you're really doing is charging them through Thrizer. You're really not doing anything else in terms of making sure that you're giving that super bill to them, explaining any of the back end insurance stuff. We'll answer any questions for them. They can always just reach out to us for that. All for the 3% credit card fees. There's no other monthly fees or any of that. So that's the big quick spiel around Thrizer. Wrapping up here, I'll kind of pause for questions at the very end after I walk through these resources. But what you will receive, I know Katie will share this out with all of you. You'll receive the webinar recording for this. You'll also get a quick out-of-network benefits cheat sheet that we put together. If you don't have time to rewatch the entire webinar, this cheat sheet kind of covers everything we talked about today. And then there's also a free trial link that Katie will share with you as well. If you want to try Thrizer out, you can try us out completely for free. You'll get waived 3% credit card fees for your first 2,500 using that link or using the code Checkpoint. So see if that works for a few clients. And we hope that it kind of overall, regardless of kind of whether you go with Thrizer or not, hopefully this, presentation helped you better understand how out-of-network benefits. There are little kinks here and there, but if you can incorporate it into your practice, it can honestly be a very powerful tool to bring a little bit more financial relief for your clients. All right. Well, thank you. I know we're short on time, but I hope I can stay a couple minutes off after to answer any final questions here.
Sure. Yeah, I figured in the final minute, do you have like a success story of Thrizer working with a provider that you can just share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I should be able to drop it in the link here, but I'm going to actually do there. We have a whole section called success stories. So I'm going to just drop it
awesome
here. Let me know if you see it. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Okay.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, of course. So that kind of walks through just different clinicians, how they've incorporated it into their practice, and should answer any questions there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. That was definitely super informative. And yes, I will be sending out all of this good information that you have shared with us today. So providers, just be on the lookout for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Bye, everyone.
Right. Thanks. Bye-bye.